They told you the story, but they didn't tell you the truth. Every mystery leaves a record. Find it here.
The lookout rang the bell 3
Iceberg!
times.
Dead
A
ahead!
sharp metallic
That's it,
sound
race!
cut through the frozen Atlantic night.
Iceberg!
Then a voice
Dead
echoed
ahead!
down to the
Speed
bridge
up,
of the
fast,
ship.
speed up!
Iceberg,
Don't
right
fall!
ahead. For a moment, time seemed to stop aboard the massive ocean liner RMS Titanic. Passengers slept peacefully in their cabins. Couples laughed in the dining rooms. Musicians played softly in the first-class lounge. But directly in front of the ship, rising out of the black water like a silent mountain, was a wall of ice. And within minutes, the most famous ship in the world would begin to die. April 14th, 1912. The RMS Titanic had been sailing across the North Atlantic for 4 days. It was the largest moving object humans had ever built. 882 feet long, packed with luxury, power, and ambition. People called it Unsinkable. The ship belonged to the powerful British shipping company White Star Line, and its captain, Edward J. Smith, was one of the most respected sailors in the world. This voyage from Southampton to New York City was supposed to be the crowning achievement of modern engineering. Instead, it would become a nightmare that still haunts history. But here's the question that historians still debate today. Was the disaster truly unavoidable? Or did a chain of small decisions quietly seal the fate of the Titanic long before it struck the iceberg? Earlier that Sunday, wireless operators aboard the Titanic received several warnings. Other ships reported massive ice fields directly along their path. One of those messages came from the nearby vessel SS Californian. The warning was clear. Dangerous ice lay ahead. But something strange happened next. The message never reached the bridge. The Titanic's wireless operators were overwhelmed, sending passenger telegrams to shore. When the Californian tried again, the operator was sharply told to keep out because the radio was busy. That warning, the one that could have slowed the ship down, was essentially ignored. Hours later, the Titanic continued racing across the icy Atlantic at nearly full speed, straight toward the iceberg. At 11:40 p.m., lookout Frederick Fleet spotted something in the darkness. At first, it looked like a shadow. Then the shape became clear. A towering iceberg, directly in the ship's path. Fleet rang the warning bell and grabbed the phone to the bridge. Iceberg right ahead. On the bridge, First Officer William Murdoch reacted instantly. Hard a starboard. The Titanic began to turn. But the ship was enormous. Over 46,000 tons of steel, moving through freezing water. It didn't turn fast enough. Passengers felt a strange vibration. Not a violent crash. Not a dramatic explosion. Just a long, scraping shudder along the side of the ship. Below the waterline, the iceberg had sliced open several compartments of the hull. At first, no one realized the damage. But deep inside the ship, icy seawater was already rushing in. And then the horrifying truth became clear. The Titanic could survive flooding in 4 compartments, but 6 had been breached. The ship wasn't just damaged, it was doomed. Smith stared silently at the damage report. The unsinkable ship had less than 3 hours to live. But telling 2,200 passengers that their floating palace was about to disappear into the Atlantic? That was another problem entirely. So the crew delayed the truth. Passengers were told to put on life jackets, just as a precaution. Meanwhile, the crew began uncovering a secret that would soon turn the disaster into chaos. The Titanic didn't have enough lifeboats, not even close. The ship carried lifeboats for about 1,178 people. But more than 2,200 passengers and crew were on board. Why? Because the ship's designers believed the Titanic was so advanced, lifeboats would never actually be needed. It was a decision that would cost more than 1,500 lives. But the worst part, even the lifeboats they had weren't filled properly. The ship tilted slowly into the freezing Atlantic. Panic began to spread. Some passengers refused to believe the Titanic could sink. Others hesitated to board the lifeboats because they looked small and unstable compared to the massive ship. So the first boats left half empty. Meanwhile, below deck, third-class passengers faced locked gates and confusing directions through the maze of corridors. By the time many reached the upper decks, the lifeboats were already gone. At 12:45 a.m., the first distress rockets shot into the night sky. Brilliant white flares exploded above the sinking ship. Someone saw them. Crew members aboard the nearby SS Californian watched the rockets from the distance, but they couldn't understand what they meant. Was it a celebration? A signal? A distress call? By the time they realized the truth, it was already too late. Deeper into the water, the bow disappeared beneath the surface. The stern lifted high into the freezing night sky. Passengers clung to railings. Families held each other for the last time. And through it all, the ship's musicians continued playing. The band leader, Wallace Hartley, reportedly chose a haunting hymn as the ship prepared to die. Then, at 2:20 a.m., on April 15th, the unthinkable happened. The great ship snapped in half, and within seconds, the RMS Titanic vanished beneath the black Atlantic Ocean. Hundreds of people were thrown into water colder than ice. The temperature was around 28 degrees Fahrenheit, -2 degrees Celsius. Most victims would not survive more than 15 minutes. Screams filled the darkness. Then slowly, one by one, the voices faded. By the time rescue ship RMS Carpathia arrived hours later, only 705 survivors remained. More than 1,500 people had died. But the tragedy left behind questions that still echo today. Why did the Titanic continue at full speed despite ice warnings? Why were lifeboats launched half-empty? And why didn't the nearby Californian respond sooner to the distress rockets? More than a century later, the sinking of the Titanic remains one of the most haunting disasters in American memory. Not just because of the scale of the tragedy, but because so many of the deaths may have been preventable. And in the freezing darkness of the Atlantic Ocean, the truth went down with the ship.